Part 2, Park Bench to Shore Break. Chapter 6, Slow on the Uptake. Although I'm slow on the uptake, not the best student in the room, somehow I knew that what I wanted in life could be gained through meditation. I'd never encountered any discipline as difficult, and yet one for which I was fresh and up for the challenge virtually every day of my adult life. And I lucked out, as I came of age at the time when great Tibetan teachers, the old ones who trained classically in the high Himalayas, came to India, Nepal, and the West after fleeing the Chinese invasion of Tibet. I met Trungpa Rinpoche when he was hitting his stride and beginning to teach at Naropa Institute in Boulder, Colorado. I attended 2 of his 3-month seminaries. I traveled to Nepal and was fortunate to study with the great Ati masters Dingo Khyentse Rinpoche and Tulku Ujin Rinpoche. I received teachings from Shalmar Rinpoche, Tai Situ Rinpoche, Jamang Kantro Rinpoche, who could break your heart on a first meeting, and Dzigar Control Rinpoche. I first met His Holiness the Dalai Lama in 1980, and His Holiness the 16th Karmapa around the same time. I traveled to Crestone, Colorado to study with Tulku Ujin's sons, Sokni Rinpoche and Minjur Rinpoche. My go-to now is Lama Tenzin Wangal, a great Bon master who always spins me to get more awake. Continuing to drop names, I went to the seminary in 1979 where Pema Chodron was a staff instructor before attaining her well-deserved great fame. In the early 1970s, Sultram Alioni was, for a time, my mindfulness meditation instructor. I've sat many week-long retreats in the Zen and Theravada Vipassana styles of Buddhism. And before these great Buddhist teachers, I met and received blessings from numerous Hindu teachers. Lots of practice. For fun, I loosely calculated how much time I've spent on a cushion. And I'm embarrassed to say, because for all that time you think I would have learned more, that I have at least 10,000 hours of formal Buddhist meditation practice under my belt. That's 10,000 plus hours staring at walls, chanting mantras, doing Vajrayana rituals, working with chakras, eating ritualistically in Japanese oryoki practice, going on long solo mountain retreats, and practicing being in space. Yet this is nothing compared to the serious meditators in the Tibetan tradition. Minjur Rinpoche had many hours of meditation practice by the time he was 18. Dingo Khyentse Rinpoche is said to have been in retreat close to 30 years of his life. And then I had a spiritual crisis, a spiritual identity breakdown. I had accumulated too much belief, had too many stock answers, and I felt smothered rather than liberated by my knowledge. I was bearing a load of mind stuff, which is something referred to as carrying the golden chains of spirituality. Also, the world of meditation had exploded. Mindfulness was now not only in vogue, it was everywhere. So I reassessed by tossing belief out and questioning what I really knew after 35 years of diligent practice. I threw out beliefs as I thought I were cleaning an overstuffed closet and went back to what I could say about my experience. I dropped all the ideas I had about my practice and asked myself a simple question. What did I want from all this effort? And there was a simpler answer. I wanted to be happy and, deep down, wanted to become love. I wanted to steer the ship of human evolution towards kindness and care for the planet. I think we all do. And as much as I've muddled through hours of mindfulness meditation practice, I don't think any of that time was a waste. It was and still is a privilege to practice. That's especially true now that I'm slightly older, and I have sort of a friend hobby that serves old age so beautifully. Learning to appreciate presence is the wisest investment I've ever made. One of the most common experiences I have teaching meditation is fielding comments from exasperated meditators who know that they should be meditating but aren't. I'll ask, how many of you have had meditation instruction? 35 hands go up. How many of you have a daily practice? 2 hands might be left up. That's why I wrote this book. Practice, practice, practice. We can learn the art of presence without hours and hours of formal sitting on a cushion cross-legged. I think it's essential to learn some mindfulness training, some taming of the mind, but without practicing and integrating what we learn, the experience can be lost before we put our shoes back on after the meditation session. I'm afraid meditation practice will be relegated to our should-do lists. Mindfulness is a technique of concentration, of mind training, essentially for virtually any endeavor. But, in my opinion, the happiness teachings must accompany this basic training, or we won't find the motivation to integrate mindfulness into our lives. One can use mindfulness to train soldiers to become better at war. It's a baseline concentration skill, but by itself, it might not lead to happiness. Soldiers are not necessarily happier because they're better fighters. I'm watching a friend build a house. He has some building skills, but it's the first house he's ever built. He makes a lot of mistakes that cost time and money. He'll build the next house in half the time and likely at much less expense. Similarly, the first generation of ex-hippie yet serious spiritual seekers taught by the first generation of greats to come to the West from the East are now aging. One hopes that many of these pioneers will pass on some of their funnier mistakes and make the job easier for the next generation drawn to know about joy. In the 50-plus years since I've started transcendental meditation, that's back in 1968, a lot has changed. Amazingly so. Back then, there were no cell phones, no internet, no computers. But the biggest change I've seen is in the internal landscape. For all those technologies, we have much busier minds, much more incentive to always be somewhere else, more edginess and frustration, much more anxiety and depression. We're more harried, impatient, and less tolerant of delayed gratification. The jury is out on how many hours of formal mindfulness practice modern practitioners will need to calm their minds before the mind's default state is awake rather than filtered and anxious. Without some stability of simple presence, relaxing into sacredness can be usurped by our security program of needing a babysitter. Thinking about the experience of sacredness kidnaps the genuine experience of heartfelt openness. It's a conundrum. How much training do you need to be able to let effortful training go? The happiness teachings are simple yet profound, and easily disguised by the tricky veneer of happiness. The guide who introduced me to these teachings was a terrifyingly creative guy who, while teaching us very traditionally in Tibetan Buddhism, trusted us to get the experiences this profound path led to. It was our job to make it work in a modern society. The mission I took away from Trungpa Rinpoche after studying with him for 13 years was, you've got to make this work in your own culture. I can't do that. The renowned British historian Arnold J. Toynbee predicted that the coming of Buddhism to the West will be regarded retrospectively as one of the great events of the 19th century. The word Buddha simply means to be awake. The aim is to awaken from trance-like slumber to joyous presence. Sounds like a good trade-off. The challenge is how to do this in everyday life, how to integrate wakefulness into our lives as householder yogis.